Welcome back. You're listening to Get Real with Bob and Stacy. You're joining us for our Leaders and Legends segment, and we have a very special guest joining us by phone today, Farai Chideya, author of The Episodic Career and professor at NYU. Welcome to the show, Farai.
Thank you so much.
I want to give a little more detail on Farai's background. She has a 20-year career history as an award-winning author, journalist, professor, and lecturer. She's appeared on public radio, all kinds of different shows. She speaks about race, politics, and culture. Chideya moderated a Democratic presidential debate in 2003, and she's a commentator for CNN, MTV, Fox, MSNBC, BET, Oxygen. You're basically all over the place. So amazing biography, and it is a pleasure to have you on today to talk about your book, Farai.
Oh, well, I just can't say enough about what you do, which is really critical. It's critical for us to share information with each other, and thank you.
So tell us about your book. I know it's broken down into 4 sections. Explain what the 4 sections of the book are about.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just quickly say why I wrote this book.
Sure.
I'm known more for writing about politics. And I was traveling around in 2010 covering, basically the midterm elections. And I found that everything about politics led back to jobs. Mm-hmm. So the book is broken into 4 sections. One is called The New Realities of America at Work. It gets into what happened to us during the Great Recession, how we're recovering, how different people are doing. There's an self-analytical section where you can take a test and put yourself into one of 16 archetypes. And I really did some really deep survey research that will help you sort of determine what you want from work. And then I look in the the latter 2 parts at how to make decisions, like basically including when to leave a job and how to leave a job. And also, what is America needing right now? There's all this talk about, the death of the American dream. And the last section says, well, what do we really need to do to rebuild the American dream?
So in today's day and age, how do you think it's best for somebody to even search for a job?
Well, I got surprised because I am a reporter, not a job expert, but I make myself an expert in everything I report on. That's part of my job. Mm-hmm. And I found that online job search is what everyone thinks works, and it only works if you also add networking, meaning, it works for some people, but basically knocking on doors of local businesses has a much higher rate for employment than online job search. And there's different reasons for that. One is that obviously if you go to a local business, and usually smaller businesses, they will know immediately whether or not they have a need. If you send an email to a recruiter, they might have to go up the food chain several times to even find out if the job is still open. Secondly, a lot of times companies do post jobs purely as a formality. They have an internal candidate, and their rules say we can't give this person the job without listing it, but they list it, but it's not really open. And finally, sitting around staring at a screen all day is just not that empowering, and people kind of click and click and click. But what I have seen, I went to, for example, a job center in Arizona where at the time this city had a 26% unemployment rate. So I would see people looking at jobs and then on Facebook, looking at jobs and then cat videos. And, it's really easy to get distracted.
Right.
So what you need to do to really make it focused is that you need to combine any kind of job search, online or offline, with networking. That is the secret sauce today. And networking is not something just for CEOs. It's not something just for white-collar workers. Networking means talking to people if you need a job or if you want to improve your job and saying, this is what I want, which means you have to know what you want, or I'm open to these things, and do you know anyone who I can talk to? Doing informational interviews, which means that that they might not have a job now, but you want to get yourself in the door. It really means being proactive.
It's so interesting because I'm hiring for my firm right now. I have about 400 employees, and we are looking for a new person in our bookkeeping department. And my partner's like, just put a ad in the local, like Craigslist or one of those sites. And I said, I really, because it's like dealing with such an important piece of our business, which is the money, I'd rather find somebody within the network of people we know because we can train the position. It's more important for us to just find somebody we trust. So let's dig into the network of agents and the people that work for us and find someone.
Yeah, I mean, and the reality is that's the way that most employers think because you want someone reliable.
Right.
It takes time to find an employee.
Right.
But what people also have to know is that you can create those relationships. So in most cities, there are all sorts of meetup groups. You can meet new people who are in your field. I have a friend, for example, who went from being a touring DJ into a sound engineer at a radio station to a computer programmer. And he did it through a mix of skills training. I mean, the people who are sound engineers have a lot of the same skills that you need to be a programmer. And he went to all these meetups and he found out what he needed to learn. And even if you're in a rural area or somewhere more remote, there's a lot of online resources where you can be part of a virtual community. So I would say that for everyone, networking means that you're not alone. And if you don't have the contacts, you can make them.
Wow, that's awesome. So you talk in your book, you say there's 3 things that people need today in order to succeed in their career. What are the 3 things?
First of all, you have to know yourself. So part of this book is a self-diagnostic tool that I created out of a lot of survey research and, career research called the work-life matrix. We can go more into that if you want, but however you do it, you need to know what you really want because one person's dream job is another person's nightmare. And I've ended up in other people's dream jobs, and I felt really guilty that I wasn't happy. But you have to know what you want. Secondly, and I think this is a real change for today, you have to know what the market is doing. You have to know if your industry is rising or falling. You have to know if your local industry is rising or falling because maybe you're in an industry that used to be in one part of the country and it's moving to another part of the country or another part of the world. And finally, you need emotional resilience. You need the ability to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again. And I have a lot of stories in this book of people who have been long-term unemployed, got fired from their dream job, or in one case even became homeless, and they fought their way back. And if you don't have that fighting spirit, it's going to be a rough road for you.
Wow. So can you share, I don't know what I want to dig into first. I definitely want to dig into the work-life matrix, but could you share a couple of the stories? I know your book is just jammed with all kinds of stories, real-life stories of people. Can you share a couple of your favorite stories from the book?
Absolutely. I'm going to share 3 people who I think are at very different kind of income, skill levels, and so to show how it applies in all cases. So one of them is a woman named Hazel who was in Yuma, Arizona. Her father was dying, and she decided she'd been an HR professional for years, and she had a great reputation, so she went to take care of him, moved from Arizona to the South where she was originally from. And when she came back 8 months later after he'd passed away, it was the depths of the Great Recession. And Yuma had a 26% unemployment rate. She could not find anything. She tried and tried. She spent down all of her savings and ended up homeless. She had a son who was in college, so he couldn't help her out financially, and he couldn't even put her up because he was living in a dorm. And so, she spent her last night in housing crying her eyes out, packed up everything in her car, moved into a shelter. But because she is a woman of generous spirit, she started doing sort of like freelance job placement in HR in the shelter. And now she is the HR director of the shelter.
Wow.
And that to me is a great story of how just never say die. Never say it's
Yes.
over.
Yes.
Yeah, and on the upper level of the income scale, there is a guy named Adam Freed who was a TV reporter, loved his job, but through a contract dispute, he got fired. And he too cried. And then he ended up looking through his network, and someone said, there's this new company called Google, and we know you're really good at languages. Why don't you come and work for us? And so he ended up as the international product director of Google and grew that division from 20 people to 600 people. And needless to say, is financially set for life. He still works because he wants to, but he doesn't have to.
Wow.
And, kind of in the middle is a woman named Elaine who has had 14 jobs in 25 years. She went to law school because her parents wanted her to. She didn't even want to go, but they forced her to pretty much. And she got out during one of the recessions in the 90s, got laid off within 8 months, and was like, look, if my parents' dream job for me didn't work out, I'm going to do what I want. So she became a writer covering technology and now is an executive at the middle level, not like a top-level executive in marketing. And so those are all very different scenarios, but what it takes is admitting that you have been crushed, taking stock of what you have around you, and staying focused on how to rebuild your life.
That is awesome, because all of those stories, all three of them ended up in careers that they're happy and passionate about.
Exactly.
Wow. Awesome. All right. I need to know about the work-life matrix. What is that all about?
Well, the work-life matrix is a tool that I developed through a mix of interviews and survey research. So just to give you some perspective, the average, survey that we have for political polls is like 1,000 people, and I surveyed 2,000. Wow. Of course, it's a big country, but it's still a pretty good sample. So the 4 questions in it are basically about how much risk you're willing to take in your career. Do you like starting projects more or finishing them more? Are you driven by solving a social problem, what I call high social impact work? And do you like making decisions alone or in a team? And these are things that I saw that really made people happy or unhappy, but often they didn't even realize that that was the reason they were happy or unhappy. Like if you're someone who wants to be the creator and inventor and start new things, but you're in a job where you just are expected to, finish this, finish that, you probably won't be happy. And first of all, let me say, the world is not created to make us happy.
Right.
We have to make ourselves happy, and sometimes we all have to take jobs that we don't like. So I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish about this. But there were some really interesting things that came out. So first of all, just by answering these 4 questions, you get placed in one of 16 archetypes, and I have a story for each one, a personal story from an individual, and also a list of the careers that people who I surveyed tended to be in. And so high risk takers were disproportionately likely to be entrepreneurs. And one of the most surprising things, and most people are not risk takers. That was another thing. There's a very small group of risk takers compared to people who are more cautious. But the most surprising thing to me that taught me a lot was that people who do high social impact work and try to solve social problems are less happy than people who work for money, who want to just want a paycheck. And there's nothing wrong with working for money, because a lot of people might work for money and they volunteer at their church or they help their neighbors or whatever. So that's not a judgment. And I realized that if you are working for money, you can set a dollar goal and you know when you've met it. But if you're working on high social impact, it's like never ending. Like, I want to create excellent education for all American children.
Wow.
When's that, so it really makes sense. And I consider myself a high social impact worker. My archetype is, I gave them each a name, is the promoter, which deals with promoting a vision of the world as you want it to be. And so for me, I try to promote, information as a tool that helps people, and storytelling and all these things. So it's not about being a salesperson, but it's about being a promoter of a certain idea. But the work that I do is never over, and I have to slow my roll sometimes and just say, you know what, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't put on this planet to save the world. You were put on this planet to do good work. And so my hope with the work-life matrix is that it gives us all more compassion for who we are, and also more compassion for our coworkers, who can be very different from us. So two people doing the same job could be doing it for different reasons and in different ways. And if people take this test together, and also the Harvard Business Review is actually going to make an online tool of this, which I'm really excited about.
Wow. I am dying to read the book right now.
I'm going to order it right now.
Yeah, just for that matrix.
Thank you.
In fact, I posted on my Facebook wall today. I was reading an article, and it said something to the effect that there are roughly 1,100 billionaires in the world, 665 self-made billionaires, and guess how many women self-made billionaires?
No idea.
14.
I guess.
Really?
Oh my God.
Is that like?
Okay,
That's it?
so I know two of them. One is Oprah, and one is the woman from Spanx, and I think maybe J.K. Rowling is one.
I don't know. I read that, and I'm like, that number just is horrible.
But no, it's
14?
horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So, this is awesome. The Episodic Career. Anybody interested in checking out this book, you can find it at Amazon or your local bookstore. It is The Episodic Career by Farai Chideya. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are amazing, and can't wait to read some more on the research you've done and the stories that you share.
You both are amazing, and I thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thanks, Farai. That's going to do it for this episode of Get Real. Make sure you tune in again next weekend. Thank you.